Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to share with you what is maybe my favorite tool and motivator on the path to financial independence. It's a simple spreadsheet and chart for tracking your journey to financial independence. Simple, but it can have a surprisingly powerful effect on how you conceptualize and visualize your path to financial independence. To reach financial independence, you'll need to save and invest enough so that your investments themselves can generate enough income to cover the costs of your lifestyle. And if you want to reach financial independence, tracking your expenses is the most important first step to take. Here's why. Once you know what your life costs, you'll know how much you need to save and invest. That's really the only way to know. Otherwise, you're just guessing and stashing money away without a specific target in mind. As your investments grow, so too does the passive income that they can generate. We can estimate this amount using the 4% rule. With the 4% rule, take the amount you've invested and divide it by 25. That's the amount of annual income those investments can safely produce each year. And if you divide your investments by 300, that gives you the amount of monthly income those investments can produce. So as you go about your merry life, saving, investing, and tracking your expenses, you can take those numbers and track your progress toward financial independence. Not only that, but you can even visualize the progress on a tidy chart with colorful lines. Colorful lines which represent the amount of financial freedom you have in your life. If you're familiar with the book Your Money or Your Life, this is very similar to the wall charts that the author talks about. It's just a slightly simplified and modern version. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and check out the Financial Independence Tracker. Okay, this is the Financial Independence Tracker. There's two components here. You've got this table where you document your expenses and your investments, and then there's this chart which is going to generate automatically as you fill in those numbers each month. So here in column A, you've got a list of months. We've got a full year of hypothetical data starting in January and ending in December. And then in column B, these are the expenses. And this is where at the end of each month, you would list how much you spent in that month. You can see we've got some hypothetical expenses here that range anywhere from $3,000 to over $5,000. But then in column C, this is automatically calculating the average expenses as you go along. So you can see in the first month in January, the average expenses are $4,000 because that's all the data it has to work with. But then when you add in $3,000 in month 2, the average expenses drop down to $3,500. And these average expenses calculate automatically each month. In the next column, you have investments. So this is going to be the total amount of money you have invested at the end of each month. You can list that here in column D, and then column E is investment income, and that's going to calculate automatically based on what you have in column D. And it's just going to take that number and divide it by 300, which tells us how much investment income that amount of investments could throw off each month, assuming that you're withdrawing 4% per year, using the 4% rule as the assumption here. And over here in the chart, this is where this data is going to be plotted on this graph. So you've got your expenses here in blue. Each month as you enter your expenses in column B, it's going to plot out here on this chart. And each dot represents a month of expenses. And this red line here is the average expenses. So, in column C, this is calculating the average expenses each month. And this gets plotted out here in this red line, which is a bit of a smoother line than your actual expenses. And this is what you want to go off of as far as what your lifestyle costs on average. And then we have this green line, which represents your investment income, column E over here. That's plotted here on this green line. And this green line is the magic line. This represents your investment income. And hopefully over time, as your investments grow and you add to them, it'll trend upward over time. There may be some dips here and there, but over time, hopefully it's trending up. And the whole name of the game here is for your investment income to go up and up and up and reach your average expense line here. Once your investment income line crosses over your average expenses line, that is the point at which you've reached financial independence. because at that point your investment income is enough to cover your expenses. And even if your expenses are higher one month than another month, your average expenses are what really matter, and the investment income that you're earning is going to cover those average expenses. Let's look at another example here. In this example, the expenses are about the same, but the investments line is flat. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that if you don't invest your money, you'll never be able to close the gap between your investment income and your average expenses. In fact, due to inflation, the gap will probably increase over time. Unless you drastically reduce your expenses, you're not going to reach financial independence. So this illustrates just how important it is to invest your money and have it grow. So let's look at another example. In this example, the investment income is increasing quite nicely, but unfortunately, so are the expenses. This illustrates that even if you do a great job saving and investing your money and the investments perform really well, you'll never reach financial independence if your expenses also inflate and go up at the same rate or faster than your investments are going up. So it's important to cap your expenses and give that investment income line a chance to catch up with your expenses. All right, another example. In this example, I'm showing that magical point where your investment income goes up and reaches your average expense line and crosses over it. It's called the crossover point. And at that crossover point, you are financially independent. And as you can see in this graph, expenses kind of up and down, but the average expense line is hovering right here, somewhere around 3,500 or so. And over time, the investment income increased, and eventually here around June crosses over the average expenses line, and that's the point of financial independence. And even though at this point you've reached financial independence, you still need to be careful to keep your expenses in check, otherwise that magic line could dip back down below the average expense line, as it has here. All right, so now that we've looked at a few examples, let me show you the tracker that I'm giving you access to down in the link in the video description. It's gonna look like this. It's gonna be blank. I've got a year's worth of months filled in here in the date column, but there's nothing in the expenses column or in the investments column. That's gonna be up to you to fill in. So if you can go back and figure out what your expenses were for January, you can enter that in here. Let's put in a number, 5,000. Investments, we're gonna say you have $250,000 in investments, and it's calculating that already you have $833 of monthly investment income based on that $250,000 that you have invested. And over time, you're going to keep filling this in. Maybe the next month you spent $4,500 and your investments grew to $260,000. Now, one thing to note here, you see these the cells in column C and E did not calculate. What you need to do is click on the first row in column C and drag down, and that's going to fill in your average expenses. Same thing for investment income. Click on the corner and drag down, and you can actually drag it all the way down if you want to. Just going to fill in some zeros. And you can see over here in the chart, as you add in your expenses and your investments, and it calculates your average expenses and investment income, it's going to start drawing out the lines on the chart over here. So we've already got a nice little trend here for your investment income going upward. That's what you want to see. Expenses going downward, fantastic. Average expenses also on a downward slope. So everything's looking good, and you're just going to keep on doing this. I'm just going to put in some fake numbers here. Maybe one month you really saved. Maybe another month you kind of blew the budget out, but you're generally around the same amount. All right. Now, average expenses, I'm going to drag this down, so it's going to calculate average expenses all the way down. You see it draws out that nice red line, trending lower. That's good. Despite the wild swings in some months, you've got a nice steady average expense line that's trending downward. Same thing for investments. Let me just fill in some data here. Just assume that your investments are going to keep on growing. Of course, it doesn't always work this way. In fact, let's do that. Let's say one month it goes down by 30,000, and then the next month you're right back on track. That's kind of how it seems to go. If only our investments would grow this quickly and this predictably. So I filled in the investments for each month, what the value of your portfolio was for each month. And then I'm going to go ahead in column E and just drag the handle down, and it's going to fill in investment income each month. And you can see that it's growing nicely. And we see that reflected here on the chart. The investment income, the green line, is going up slowly but surely, going up and up and up. And eventually, someday, it's going to rise up and meet this red line, your average expenses line. That is when you've reached financial independence. I hope you see why this is such a powerful tool and motivator on your path to financial independence. I enjoy using this financial independence tracker, and I really think you will too. In fact, I've been using it for about 3 years now, and it's been great to see the progress over time. And it's great to see that even though some months have stumbles and setbacks, maybe because the market takes a dive or my spending spikes, that the overall trend is consistently heading in the right direction. I really like to see that. So I invite you to go ahead and download the spreadsheet and start using it too. There's a link in the description below that will allow you to download it for free. Then you can open it up in Google Sheets, save a copy, and start entering in your own numbers. And if you want to learn more about the basics of financial independence, I'll link to my Financial Independence 101 video right now and also in the video description below. If you got value from this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm creating new videos weekly on saving, investing, and early retirement.